Welcome to Biome. This is Alex Zubin, your host, narrator, and your friendly flying saucer repair person. Dear listener, I'm so glad to have you join me for today's interview with Grigory Lukin. In today's interview, Grigory and I discuss After You Catch Them All, which was story number 4 of season 1. After You Catch Them All is a darkly comedic story in which a pompous and egomaniacal planetary administrator gets a little too excited and carried away with his assignment to exterminate all invasive life on a planet he is charged with governing. It's a deliciously slow build in which our planetary administrator is given numerous warnings and chances to save himself and his people. But the man's pride blinds him until it's too late. If it's been a while since you've listened to After You Catch Them All, skip back to episode 4 and give it a listen. Grigory Lukin is an award-winning filmmaker and an internationally published author of fiction and nonfiction. He's also a vagabond with 3 passports and far too much free time. His writing has appeared in Fano, The Colored Lens, and multiple anthologies. He enjoys pastries, museums, and hiking from Mexico to Canada. His secret lair is in Montreal. And now, on to our interview. Thank you so much for joining today, and we'll kick right off with our questions for you, Grigory. My first question for you today is, can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to begin this story? Was there a character or image or a question that kind of seeded this? I know you said that A Sound of Thunder was part of the inspiration here, but how did it all come together to kick off?
I'm a writer, and I always want to improve my craft. There's a To quote one of the Austin Powers movies, relentless self-improvement. And it's always important to try to find new tricks and tips and basically level up in any way possible. And I was revisiting some of the old classics, including that story by Bradbury, A Sound of Thunder. And I had read it before, but just as a casual reader. And this time around, I read it as a writer. And it was quite surprising because the story changed the world with his concept of the butterfly effect. But the story itself is only 8 pages long or so, and it's very compact. There isn't a single wasted paragraph or sentence. And so everything in the story has its job, and it does its job really, really well. And so it got me thinking if I could maybe write an homage from a different perspective. And I mean, I'm no Bradbury. I will never be a Ray Bradbury. But I kind of use that as a blueprint, and with just 2 characters talking and discussing an ecological situation. And then something goes haywire, and the rest was history.
I mean, I guess you could say that his story itself was a kind of butterfly effect. It has spread throughout the world in its own way, right? Would you say that there's any element that popped out at you when you read it as a writer that you didn't see or that you may have seen differently when you were reading it just as a casual reader?
The title itself, A Sound of Thunder, it repeated, I think, a couple of times throughout the story, and I believe it was a key part of the very last sentence. And yeah, I rather enjoyed that, and I try to mimic that particular element with describing the robot's voice when it identified the cat, and then, well, when the ending happened, just in case anybody is watching this video before listening to the podcast. Highly unlikely, but nonetheless. And yeah, it's just repetition, and with short stories, it's always important to wrap things up and to tie up those ends at the very ending. And one of the ways to do it is to refer back to an element that you planted very carefully earlier in the tale. And so that's what I try to do here.
Perfect. Yeah, and it sounds like it worked pretty well. It worked very well for me. I loved that ironic sort of encompassing that you created. So when it comes to writing for readers, writing for the general audience, was there anybody that you had in mind, any specific kind of audience or reader that you wanted to reach with this story?
Not per se. I know Stephen King writes with his wife in mind as his ideal reader. I don't have a wife, and yeah, so I don't really have an ideal reader. I mostly write the kind of stuff that I wish I would have read when I was much, much younger. Because as a kid, I basically imprinted on Jules Verne and Terry Pratchett and Douglas Adams, and those were my key influences. And there were never enough fun, short sci-fi stories for me to devour. So I suppose, in a way, I'm writing for my much, much younger self.
That makes sense. And I think that really dovetails perfectly with the goal of Biome to have more short stories out there available and accessible to everybody. So definitely grateful for you to be part of that journey. Was there anything in this story that you were nervous about trying out or putting on the page? Any topic, theme, or technique that you weren't sure was going to work, but you tried it anyway?
Not per se, although I know that a lot of readers slash listeners would be not big fans of what happens to captured animals, especially with Mrao scene where the poor tabby gets captured into an unbreakable net, and then we know exactly what's going to happen to the tabby. And it's all off screen, but it's described earlier in great detail, which I did to make sure that the two human characters were pretty unsympathetic. So maybe they have, some little strand of goodness somewhere within them, but that is not shown in the story. And so it's basically this balance you gotta strike, that you have to show that your villains are villains, or at least very, very amoral. And at the same time, it might alienate some readers. Like, I don't use beta readers because I'm paranoid about AI and everything. It only takes one person to feed it into a plagiarism machine. So I don't know how, for example, vegan people would react to that story.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And I know that as I was reading it, I thought to myself, one of the things that this story makes very clear when it comes to living beings, I mean, this story puts people in the same boat as living beings, similar as a cat, similar to anything else around us. So I think while the characters are not sympathetic, the story itself is sympathetic to sort of all living beings that are featured there. And I think that was very beautifully done. And then going off of the part about what you may be nervous about or what you tried, was there any scene that you found difficult to put on the page? Was there any part of this that you kind of struggled or went back and forth on, maybe rewrote a couple times?
Not really. I had the idea in my mind the whole time. It was just some parts of the story are slightly funny by design, and it's a very, very tough market out there for funny science fiction. It's kind of a pendulum, and right now the pendulum is on the far side. Douglas Adams had died way too young, and so if he had stuck around for a couple more decades with Terry Pratchett, then the world would be a much more fun place. But yeah, so I basically had the idea in my mind the entire time, and I'm a plotter, so I write an outline and then I add flesh to the skeleton. But yeah, I had to try not hard, but I had to put some effort to make sure it wasn't like a haha campy story, and as some of my stories are, but more of a dark story with elements of levity.
Yeah. I guess I just have to ask, is comedy and humorous elements something that you try and include in a lot of your stories, or is this kind of an outlier?
No, that just comes to me naturally because, like I said, Jules Verne, Douglas Adams, and Terry Pratchett, I mean, they were my holy sci-fi trinity. And Jules Verne is not necessarily a funny guy, but his books are never exactly 100% serious. For me, when I consider sci-fi concepts, I always see humor in them. Like right now, a whole bunch of stuff with headlines about AI. I mean, they're just hilarious. They really are. And yeah, so whenever I envision a new technology or whatever is going to happen in the future, then I always try to think of the unintended consequences and just how much more amusing that would make people's lives, even though they might not appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that another element that's definitely very present in this story is sort of using the absurd to underline the horror. It almost accentuates the horror in a certain sense. And so it sounds like you're very much in that lineage of using absurdity and the humor inherent in that absurdity to really pull out the deeper themes of a story.
It's a fun spice, and not a lot of, in my experience, not a lot of writers use it. Like I said, right now the pendulum is swinging toward the serious literary fiction, which is fine. But yeah, absurdity is a really great angle to use when brainstorming concepts.
Well, I'm glad that you included the levity there. I know that I've gotten feedback from several listeners that they enjoy the fact that this is kind of a piece that makes you think, but it also is something that'll make you smile. Now, you kind of hinted at this earlier, but my next question is, did you ever consider any other endings, or did you consider sort of changing it after you wrote it down, or was it there from the beginning?
Oh no, that was always going to be the ending canonically. It's partly it was inspired by New Zealand's campaign to eradicate all of the invasive, so-called invasive species, the cats, the goats, and everything. And part of me always wondered if they were going to finish up with, deporting themselves, just to round things up. Uh, as far as the lineages go, it's one of the most recently populated parts of the world. And yeah, so it's one of those things where be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a relatively common theme in a lot of science fiction, but this one explores it from the perspective of a different planet and maybe new technologies, a new perspective on that, which I think is really great. All right, so I think now we'll move on to like a flash round. I'll just ask you some really quick this or that questions. Are you ready for it?
Let's do it.
So normally I would ask you if you're a plotter or a pantser, but you already told me that you're a plotter. Is that always true, or is that usually true, or 50-50?
I don't know. That's always true. Even when I write a very short piece of flash fiction, so less than 1,000 words, I have the concept in my mind and exactly how it's going to end, and then it's just about sitting down and getting it done.
Fair enough. And what do you think would happen if you were told to sit down and write it without a plan?
There would need to be a very big bag of money involved.
All right. Well, we'll see if we can make that happen for you. What is your preferred power hour or time of day when writing happens? Do you write in the morning? Are you a night owl? Do you do it after lunch? When is your most productive creative
Right now I'm traveling. I'm recording this from Tehachapi, South California.
work?
But when I'm back in Canada, it's very bad for my health. But Tim Hortons, extra large black coffee, and two of their delicious donuts. That combination of caffeine and sugar, complete overload, it's the best creative fuel I have. And doesn't matter what time of day, it's a lot of my short stories came out of that.
Okay. I think, was it Balzac who just overdosed on coffee and wrote for binges of 48 hours at a time?
I think a lot of them did that. I think Voltaire did the same thing. Nikola Tesla once tried to read all of Voltaire, and then he complained that that guy had an infinite supply of coffee, and Tesla did not.
Yeah, no. So, some of those folks in the 1800s really pushed things to the limit. All right, your drafting vibe. Do you like to play music or do you like to write in complete silence? What's your preferred mode?
It's, for me personally, that is distracting, and yeah, I just sit down and ideally in silence, and yeah, just type it all in.
Okay. And the surrounding environment, does it also have to be silent? Do you prefer like a silent room or is a cafe okay?
So I used to work in the food industry and in service industry, and so I'm always anxious that people behind the counter would hate me if I just bought, like a $8 coffee and a crumpet and just occupied their space for an hour and a half. But I've written stories in the most random environments, airports, on airplanes, while walking through a snowstorm. A lot of them in the comfort of my own home. But right now, I am in the middle of the Pacific Crest Trail, so I'm still writing one story per week, in my sleeping bag before sunset. And yeah, so I don't think the environment matters so much.
That's great because it keeps you productive wherever you are, right? What is your favorite tool of choice? Are you a keyboard warrior or are you married to the pen or do you kind of switch it up and you do both longhand and digital?
It's nice to write on a laptop, with a keyboard and all, but for the last 8 months, I've been writing pretty much exclusively on my cell phone. Important not to get married to one specific medium because George R. R. Martin blames his ongoing writer's block on the fact that he can only write in his little, sanctuary, his home base, and only on the prehistoric 1980s computer. Whether it's true or not is up to him, but you never want to get caught into that kind of over specialization like a koala bear that you
Yeah.
can only eat, one certain type of leaf.
So basically what you're telling me is you do not want to be the next George R. R. Martin.
I mean, I'm already a filmmaker on the side, so I had my share of red carpets. But if the opportunity comes with HBO and whatnot, I'll consider it.
Okay. All right. Well, HBO, if you're listening, you know what to do. All right. Final lightning round question for you. You get to have a literary dinner, an hour and a half, with any living writer or historic, and you get to have a wonderful dinner, a wonderful conversation. Who would that be and why?
Hmm. Tough questions, tough questions. Yeah, let's go with Jules Verne because he had a lot of ideas that were way ahead of his time. And I'm curious what he would have thought about the toys we have now, from satellites to nuclear submarines to robots crawling on Mars.
Perfect answer. Well, Grigori, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Cheers.
All right. If you've enjoyed this interview, make sure you're subscribed to this podcast. Since sharing is caring, share Biome with your friends and family. Next week's interview with Toshia Kame will be released as a written exchange exclusively on Patreon. The interview will be available for free, but I hope you consider signing up to support Biome so I can keep sharing amazing stories and interviews with you. But for now, dear listener, farewell, wherever the days take you.